Welcome back to The Strategy Show, the podcast that connects real-world business events with the strategy concepts that help us understand them. My name's Ben, and today we'll be looking at the absolutely business-critical topic of organisational structure. Helping me chat through the key issues with you is Martin, a senior project manager with 30 years of real-world experience of dealing with the good and bad points of organisational structure.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
I'm guessing in your time as a telecoms project manager, you've seen organisations in probably most of the different structures we're going to be looking at today.
Absolutely, it's a really important thing to be aware of. It can have an enormous impact on the success or failure of any organisation.
So let's start things off. Whenever we look at a really successful company, say Apple or Tesco, we always focus on the shiny stuff.
That's right, the logo or the product.
Exactly, the marketing and the image. But we almost never look at the skeleton underneath it all.
Oh, the skeleton, that's a really great analogy.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you walking past a beautiful house, the paint's perfect, the garden looks amazing.
Yep.
But if the frame behind the walls, the actual structure is just wrong or rotten, it's not going to matter how nice the paint job is. The house is going to fall down.
Yeah, it's just a nightmare to live in. The doors don't close properly, the heating's off, and you're constantly fighting the house just to get anything done.
Yeah. And of course, in business, that skeleton is what we call organisational structure. And I know, it sounds a bit dry.
It sounds like a lecture you'd fall asleep in, which I'm sure isn't like one of yours.
Well, no, not really. I've put plenty of students to sleep in lectures in my time. But we're going to try and prove today that it's actually one of the most dramatic parts of a business. Because ultimately, it's the blueprint for how power flows and who gets in trouble when everything goes wrong.
And why some huge companies can react really quickly like ninjas, and others are, well, like beach whales.
We'll also look at some more complex theories from Henry Mintzberg, and then these very modern virtual companies that barely even exist in the real world. Our mission today is to decode all of that. We want to figure out why a business would choose one path over another and what happens when those structures start to break down. And we're going to see, I think, that every single one of these structures is actually just a trade-off. There's no kind of perfect shape for an organisation. You're always trading speed for control or maybe innovation for stability.
Yeah, it really is just a game of pick your poison.
Okay, so let's look at the skeleton, the structure itself. Let's walk through the traditional types. There's kind of an implied evolution when it comes to structure. You don't just pick one, you sort of grow into it. Let's start at the very beginning, day one. The structure most new businesses start with, which we call the entrepreneurial structure.
This is the classic startup phase. You have the founder right in the middle of everything. Every single decision, every wire leads back directly to them.
Yeah, so, can I buy a new stapler? You have to ask the founder. What colour should the new logo be? Ask the founder. Is the office dog allowed on the couch? Ask the founder.
It's incredibly fast, and that's a big pro. Communication is instant. The vision is pure because it's all coming from one single brain.
But, the con is pretty obvious as well. That entrepreneur is going to get very tired.
Oh, they do it. It's the founder's trap. Eventually, the sheer volume of decisions exceeds the capacity of one human brain. The founder becomes the bottleneck, and the business stops growing because the founder is too busy approving stapler purchases to think about the long-term strategy.
And I suppose if we're feeling dramatic, what happens if the entrepreneur gets hit by a bus?
It's a bit dramatic, but the whole organisation just dissolves and there's nothing left.
There's also a really interesting point here about skills. I guess we have to ask a pretty blunt question about the founder, which is, are they actually any good at, strategy, marketing, human resources?
They are totally valid questions to ask. Entrepreneurs are usually the great visionaries or product geniuses.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they have any idea how to run a complex payroll system.
Or to handle a tricky HR dispute either.
Exactly, but in this structure they have to be the expert at absolutely everything, which is impossible.
And for the employees, this structure has to start feeling pretty suffocating eventually.
Oh, it turns into total micromanagement. If you have to ask for permission to buy a £10 stapler, you're not going to feel empowered at all. You're going to feel like a helper instead of a professional.
So our small business essentially becomes on fire. The founder's drowning, the business has to evolve. I suppose basically you've got to go out and hire some grown-ups.
That's right, and enter the functional structure.
So this is where we see the organisational chart kind of change into that traditional family tree shape that we all know. So you've got the CEO at the top, and then you've got a row of directors underneath them.
Yeah, that's the area of specialisation. You finally stop expecting the founder to do every single thing. Instead, you hire a director of sales, director of marketing, head of finance, and a head of production.
It sounds very sensible, because I guess what you're doing is you're bringing in the experts.
Yeah, it is sensible. It creates real efficiency. Now you have a dedicated HR director ensuring you don't accidentally break employment law.
Which is nice.
Yep, and a finance head making sure you aren't just bleeding cash. The overall quality of work goes way up because actual specialists are running their respective shows.
It makes a lot of sense. It's efficient. The junior accountants can learn from the senior accountants.
It's great for creating a depth of expertise. It's a machine designed for efficiency, but it creates a new monster, the silo.
The silo. I feel like everyone who's ever worked in a medium to large office complains about silos in some way, shape, or form.
And for very good reason. When you group people by function, they stop caring about the overall product and start caring only about their department. If you're a car company, the finance team's goal becomes to save money, not make a great car.
And how about the engineering team's goal?
Their goal becomes to make the most technically perfect engine you can imagine, not make an engine that could actually build or sell at a profit.
Now that sounds like a massive potential problem.
Oh, it's a business tale as old as time. Sales go out and promises a customer a jetpack by Christmas. They come back to engineering and say, hey, we need to build a jetpack. And engineering says, that's physically impossible. Definitely not by Christmas.
And finance says?
Finance says we don't have the budget for jetpack R&D anyway. And they just sit there and fight. They throw things at each other and communication just grinds to a halt.
Okay, so let's say we survive the silo wars. We managed to keep growing. Now we aren't just a big company, we're an absolute empire. We've gone global.
And that's exactly where the functional structure starts to crack all over again.
Because if you're the marketing director, you can't possibly manage the bespoke strategy for 50 different countries in 50 different products.
Yeah, your head would just explode. It's just too much.
So we move to the next evolution, the divisional structure. This is how the true giant companies tend to operate.
Yeah, that's right. You can basically slice this giant organization in two main ways. You can divide the company by geography, or you can divide it by product.
Let's have a look at the geographic split first. This seems very, very common for retail.
It is very common. Think about a massive clothing chain. The heavy winter clothes that sell incredibly well in London aren't going to sell at all in Texas, for example.
So you literally then just split the company down. So you have a dedicated UK division and a completely separate US division.
Yeah.
And each of those divisions is basically operating as its own mini company.
Yeah, exactly. The UK division has its own sales team, its own HR department, and its own marketing squad.
Yeah.
And they focus 100% on just the UK market.
Well, that makes sense. I suppose it's not the only way to divisionalize our company, though, is it? We can also split it down by product, like, say, Apple might do.
Yeah, Apple could be a classic example for this. They don't just have one giant manufacturing department trying to build every single device at exactly the same time.
Yeah, so they split into very distinct divisions. They've got iPads, iPhones, iMac, HomePods.
Which is brilliant because if I'm an engineer working on the iPad screen, I really don't need to sit for a 2-hour meeting to talk about the power cord for a HomePod.
And I guess more importantly than that, the CEO, Tim Cook, doesn't have to sit in those meetings either. So this structure frees up the senior board to focus on the overall strategy of the company.
Yeah, and the executives can actually look at the horizon and plan for the future because the division heads are managing all the messy day-to-day stuff.
It sounds kind of perfect. Everyone stays in their lane. Everyone focuses on their specific product. So where's the catch with this one?
The catch is money, a truly epic amount of money.
Because of the duplication of roles.
Exactly. Think about it. If you have an iPad division and an iPhone division and a Mac division, and they all act like their own little mini companies.
So I guess each of them has to have their own HR manager.
Yep.
They need their own finance team, their own marketing department.
Exactly. You're paying for the exact same function 3 or 4 times over, and you totally lose any economies of scale.
So potentially, what we're saying is instead of one giant corporate purchasing department negotiating a massive bulk discount, you now have 4 smaller purchasing teams who are all getting much worse deals.
Yeah, and it's not just the financial cost either. You can also get a lack of consistency.
This has to be a huge risk for consumer brands.
Oh, it is. If the iPad marketing team, for example, decides on a very sleek minimalist vibe for their ads, then the iMac marketing team decides to go edgy and incredibly colourful.
If the consumer gets confused, I suppose it stops feeling like one big unified Apple.
It does, right, yeah. You have to constantly fight internal battles just to keep the brand glued together, so even the divisional structure isn't perfect.
Okay, so we want the efficiency of the functional structure, but we also want the focus and the speed of the divisional structure. Some genius comes along and says, well, why not both? And now we enter stage 4, the matrix structure.
The matrix, the structure everybody loves to hate.
The idea here, I suppose, is simple, but sort of horrifying. Staff have 2 bosses.
Yeah, this is honestly the reality for so many professionals today. You have a functional boss. Let's say you're a computer programmer, so that's the head of programming. They decide your salary, your promotion, and your training. They care about the quality of the code that you write.
Okay, got it. So that's boss number one.
But you also have a project boss. Let's say the product manager for the new app launch. They care about deadlines. They just want the thing shipped in time.
So let's say it's Tuesday. The functional boss looks at my work and says, you know what, this code is sloppy, which it would be if I tried to write it. I want you to rewrite it. Take all week if you need to, but make it perfect. And then the project boss comes over and says, well, we launched this app on Wednesday, ship it now, bugs and all. So who do I listen to?
Well, that's the nightmare. You're on the rope in a constant tug of war. The Matrix is actually designed to force that conflict. It forces these two bosses to get in a room and fight it out. Quality versus speed. So hopefully we get an effective compromise on both.
Although I suppose in reality, very often they'll just end up fighting through me.
Yep, that's correct. It leads to incredibly high stress, a lot of confusion, and so many meetings. Because you can't just make a decision. You have to align everyone all the time. It's by far the costliest structure to run, both in money and in human sanity.
So why on earth would anybody do it? It sounds awful. Why does anybody use the Matrix?
Because the world is just that complex sometimes. If you're NASA or Google or a big pharmaceutical company like Pfizer, you need that deep technical expertise from the function, and you need to deliver specific complex projects on time, like the division allows you to do. You can't just choose one. You have to suffer through the matrix to try and get both.
So we're saying really it's a necessary evil.
It often is, yes, because when it actually works, it's incredibly powerful. It lets you assemble those cross-functional dream teams instantly. You can pull the very best engineer and the sharpest marketeer and the most ruthless accountant into a specific project team, execute the project perfectly, and then disband the team. It's built for flexibility.
And it sounds absolutely exhausting. So let's pivot to something a bit more philosophical. As an alternative to these classic models, and the ones I guess we see in most real-world companies, we've got Henry Mintzberg. Now, he didn't just look at the lines and boxes, he looked at where the power is.
Yeah, Mintzberg's a great example because he asks the most important question: who is holding the power? Not who's supposed to be in charge according to the chart, but who actually calls the shots.
Now, he contrasts two types of bureaucracies that I think explain so much about different work cultures. The machine bureaucracy versus the professional bureaucracy.
This is a really critical distinction. Think of a machine bureaucracy like a car factory or maybe a McDonald's. Who holds the power in that system? It's certainly not the person on the assembly line flipping the burger.
No, absolutely not.
It's not even the store manager.
It's the technostructure, I suppose. So the people who write the manual, the process engineers.
Exactly, the people who design the fryer to beep at exactly 3 minutes. The power lies in the process. The worker is just a cog in the machine. If that worker quits, you just hire a new one. Show them the manual and the machine keeps running. Efficiency is God. And whoever writes the manual on a day-to-day basis controls the business, arguably even more so than the directors, who Mintzberg calls the strategic apex.
So the technostructure dominates and the focus is very much on rules. I guess that's great for standardization because everyone knows exactly what rules to follow. So, you always make exactly the same burger. But it must also be quite demotivating as an employee because you must feel like you don't matter.
Precisely. The company isn't interested in you innovating or thinking outside the box. They just want you to do as you're told.
Now, let's contrast that with the professional bureaucracy, like a hospital.
Right, who holds the power in a hospital? Is it the hospital administrator in the corner office? The technostructure again?
No, it's the skilled surgeons and the doctors.
That's right. If an administrator walks into an operating room and tells the surgeon, "You're taking too long, you need to speed it up," the surgeon will just throw them out of the room. In a professional bureaucracy, the power lies with the operating core, the highly skilled workers themselves.
Because they're the ones that have the actual knowledge of how to do things. You can't standardize heart surgery the way you standardize a Big Mac.
Exactly. This is where so many organizations fail. They try to manage a hospital like it's a factory. They try to impose machine rules on professional workers. They start measuring doctor performance by the number of patients they treat per hour. And what happens?
I guess either your doctors are either going to burn out or they'll go into some sort of major revolt.
Yeah, the best professionals leave because their autonomy is being crushed. You have to know which beast you're riding. You can't micromanage a surgeon.
Now that connects really well to this other dilemma that we have, which is centralization versus decentralization. Where do we make the decisions? Is it at headquarters or is it at the local branch?
Let's use a real-world example here. Think about McDonald's again. For years, they were the ultimate centralized machine. HQ in America decided the menu, full stop.
And the goal there was consistency, wasn't it? So a Big Mac in Tokyo needed to taste exactly like a Big Mac in London or Sydney.
Yeah, which is great until they tried to expand into India. In India, a huge proportion of the population doesn't eat beef for religious reasons.
So if you're a fully centralized company, you insist on selling beef burgers and you absolutely fail.
Yeah, you go out of business almost immediately. They had to decentralize. They had to give the local Indian managers the power and autonomy to change the menu, and hence the Maharaja Mac was born, made with chicken or veggies.
So I suppose decentralization is basically about survival in local markets.
Yeah, it's about speed and relevance. The local manager knows the customer. The executive, the big high-rise head office doesn't. If you strip all the power from the local managers, you become slow, out of touch, and eventually you may become extinct.
But of course, there is a downside to decentralization, isn't there?
Oh, of course, if you decentralize too much, you lose the brand. If the McDonald's in India starts selling sushi, is that even a McDonald's anymore?
And that's the balance you have to strike.
Yeah, it's always a trade-off.
Now, there's another concept we need to consider, which is linked to this, which is the concept of a span of control.
Oh, yeah.
This often feels like a very academic issue to people. Can we maybe try and translate this into something a bit more practical?
Absolutely. So span of control is really just a fancy academic way of asking one simple question. How many people report directly to one boss?
Okay, so this span of control can either be narrow or wide.
Yeah, it can. So a narrow span means I'm a manager and I only have, say, 3 people reporting into me. That means I can watch them like a hawk, I can heavily mentor them, constantly check their work.
So very, very strong managerial control.
Yes, but think about the maths. If every single manager in the company only manages 3 people, you're going to need an absolute army of managers.
Which is going to be incredibly expensive.
Very expensive. And information takes forever to trickle down through all those layers of management.
So then a wide span means I manage, say, I don't know, like 20 people.
Yeah, exactly. It's much cheaper because you need far fewer managers overall, and decisions happen a lot faster.
But then I suppose the question is, can one person genuinely support 20 employees? Can I really manage them and actually have any idea what they're doing all day, every day?
Well, usually no. There can be workload issues for managers in a wide span, and the employees often end up lacking support. They're basically left to sink or swim on their own, though nowadays companies use technology like Microsoft Teams and Slack to speed up communications with and monitoring of employees, which allows for wider spans of control.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the future, or I guess what's really the present. Most of what we've looked at are very traditional approaches to structure, but there are modern, kind of more flexible structures that are becoming more common. Again, driven often by improving technology, like we mentioned. And these are kind of the ghost firms, where we're moving away from these solid blocks and hierarchies into sort of fluid virtual networks.
And that's the point where the physical building itself starts to disappear.
So first up on the list, we have the virtual organization.
Okay, so imagine a company with no office, no servers of its own. It's all on Amazon or Microsoft servers. No full-time employees, just a network of contractors communicating on Slack and Zoom from all over the world.
I mean, it must be the ultimate startup dream because there's almost no overheads.
Oh, it's incredibly cheap to start. You can tap into amazing talent in Brazil, Poland, and Japan all at the same time. But there's a really interesting risk, which is the loss of USP, the unique selling point of your business.
Because I suppose if I'm using the same freelance developers from the same platform as you, and I use the same Amazon servers as you, and I use the same outsourced marketing agency as you, what exactly makes my company special?
Exactly, you just become a commodity. If you don't own the means of production, you don't build your own core skills, and you don't really own your destiny, you're just a project manager with a bunch of rented assets.
Which leads us on to the next one, which is the hollow structure. It's sometimes called the Nike model.
This is strategic outsourcing on steroids. You ask yourself one question: what are we the best in the world at? And for a company like Nike, the answer is design and marketing.
Okay, so we keep that in-house. What about actually making the shoes?
We're not actually great at that. Let the specialized factories in Vietnam do it. What about shipping them around the world? Let FedEx do it. What about our accounting and finance? Just outsource it.
So the company's basically hollowed out. It's really just a brain, which is the design team, and a mouth, which is the marketing team. It has no actual body.
Yeah, exactly. It's extremely profitable. You don't have to own or manage any expensive factories, but it's risky. If that factory in Vietnam decides to steal your new shoe designs and sell them out the back door, or start making something similar for your rivals, well, you don't own the factory. You can't just walk in and stop them, well, not easily anyway. You become very vulnerable to your partners.
Okay. So the final flexible structure that we have is the modular structure.
Yeah, that's what's known as the Lego approach. Think of a phone company. They don't make the screens, they don't make the chips, they don't make any parts at all. They just buy these modules from the world's best specialists and then they assemble them.
Which seems smart because you sort of get the best of everything.
It is, but the risk is leakage. You're teaching your suppliers your business, and one day that supplier might just decide to become your biggest competitor.
That's fascinating. So let's try to bring all of this home. We've looked at the kind of spider web of the new startup. We've looked at all the silo problems of the functional structure, these kind of massive empires of the divisional structure. And we've moved into the chaotic grids of the matrix where everybody's arguing with each other. We've got these ghost-like virtual, hollow, and modular companies. We've considered Mintzberg and how power flows through the organization.
It is quite a menu of options.
And honestly, what strikes me is that none of them are actually just the good one.
No, definitely not. There's absolutely no perfect structure. It's entirely dependent on the context of your specific business.
Yeah, like, I suppose, size and how fast the market's moving.
Exactly. If you're running a nuclear power plant, do you really want a highly decentralized creative matrix structure where everybody's empowered just to make up their own rules?
God, no. In that case, I would like an incredibly rigid, very centralized, functional control because I want maximum safety.
Of course you do. But if you're a nimble tech startup trying to launch a revolutionary new AI tool next month, that exact same nuclear plant structure will kill your company instantly.
Because, I mean, so you'd never get anything shipped. You need to be an entrepreneur in a matrix to survive that.
Exactly. It depends on how fast the market moves and honestly how much control the owners want to maintain.
Okay, I want to leave everyone listening with a thought that really stuck with me from the very beginning of our chat today.
Yep, go for it.
We talked about that entrepreneur sweating in their garage and how eventually their very success is actually what creates a massive crisis. The simple structure that works really perfectly when they're small literally becomes the thing that strangles the business when they start to grow.
That's right, it's the bottleneck.
And I think that applies to you and your own work, not just to billionaire CEOs. The way you organize your team or your department or even just your own daily tasks. The structure that got you to where you are right now is almost certainly the exact structure that's going to break you if you refuse to change it to get to the next level.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate paradox of growth, isn't it? You have to be willing to systematically dismantle the very thing you made you successful in the first place, just so you can survive the next stage.
And the problem is most people wait until the crisis actually hits. They wait until, the owner has massive burnout or there's plunging profits because you're not getting things out to the market in time before they finally decide that, maybe we do need to draw a new organizational chart.
Yeah, and that's almost always too late to save things smoothly.
And on that note, I'd like to thank Martin for joining me on this episode. It's been great having your insights into some of the practical issues around organizational structure.
No problem, anytime.
And thanks to everyone listening for joining us on this episode. I hope you found it useful and hopefully interesting. Please remember to follow us so you get notified of future episodes as they drop. And we'll see you next time.